welcome to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by OMVIC. I am joined today by John Raymond. He's with the APA. He's a consultant, and Chris Muir is our mechanic and professor, Professor Muir. We have a lot of news today, and we have one of my pet topics. We just had some changes finally been announced about daytime running lights and the rears that are never lit up on cars. My mail explodes with this.
Could you imagine your biggest pet peeve landed in my my email this week, and essentially Transport Canada will be mandating the importance of having real tail lights on at all times, especially dusk and dawn at night, essentially, and that will come in effect in 2020. I can't be happier, and I know you probably have many comments on this.
I've been beating this drum for, I think, 6 years, at least twice a year, writing about it, and I don't think there's any topic that gets more feedback from viewers and readers than this. And viewers, you all know what I'm talking about. You're driving down the road and the back is not lit up because their dash is lit up, so they don't know they've only got their daytime running lights on, which have been mandated from 20 years now, I think. 89. So I've always asked, why can't manufacturers toggle in the rear so that they go on at the same time as the daytime running lights? Ideally, everyone would pull on their whole lighting system all the time or leave it set in auto, but they don't. Now, after all these years.
Could you imagine 89 daytime running lights, which were in Scandinavia for years, and so many people driving along with no taillights on because, like you said, they saw the dash. Some of the issues going forward to make this mandate in 2020 that certainly Chris could talk about is there's actually two settings on a bulb. So the brake bulb setting and then the low voltage setting. So they're going to have to work that out. My guess is the low voltage setting, which is the normal night lights, will actually get brighter, and that's what I've also read. But I think for consumers, Canadian consumers' safety, this is a major event. For sure.
I still don't know, how do we, I'm going to ask you both this, how do we, people said, what's a signal we can do to people to tell them that their rear's not, and I can't come up with a hand signal except for the one that most people use very frequently, which just makes me crazy. And a lot of people say, well, if you're too stupid to know that, you shouldn't be driving. But I'm like, no, there's people in your household, there's people you love that aren't aware of it. So if you're so great, go and tell them and double check with the people you care about. A lot of people turn off that auto setting if you're in a rental car, if someone else drove your car, it's been detailed. We can all fall into this crevice because the dash is lit up. So even with the new regulations, which I'm thankful for, how do we get people to check everyone?
Because in the past we could flash our lights and then people don't know that. We've hit the brake pedal a couple times after we passed them, and that doesn't seem to do anything.
No. A lot of it is trying to get their attention. You flash them and from behind and they go, oh, he wants to pass, he wants me to move over. You can't shut off your daytime running lights. So the old turn off the lights and turn them back on doesn't work anymore. And I recently ran into a person where I basically chased them down and said, hey, your tail lights aren't on. She had just had that Jeep in for service at the dealership, and they turned off the lights in order to save her battery. So it was not a fault of her own. Dash is lit up like, like the Vegas Strip, and she had no idea the taillights weren't functioning.
So in essence, there should only be two components to a light switch. One, there shouldn't be a light switch, but either high beams on your signal stack or a rheostat inside your car or something like for fog lamps, because you don't really need the switch. Once we move to 2020 and the tail lamps are on, it will. When you turn on the car, they'll stay on. When you turn off the car, they'll go off.
So this will start to be effective about 2025 then, because...
No, 2020.
No, by the time, in 2020, we're still going to be driving 10-year-old cars or 15-year-old cars.
Oh, that's true.
So that's why, I mean, even though we're finally getting on this, we're going to have this huge backlog of people still driving vehicles where it's not obvious.
It would be interesting to see the manufacturer take a little bit of a head on this and make it retroactive. A lot of these lighting systems can be reprogrammed. So when the dashboard lights are on, the tail light automatically comes on that low intensity setting.
Software fix?
Sure, for a lot of vehicle models, all the lighting system is controlled by the body controller.
Yeah, and a good example is, because US wasn't on daytime running lights, it was a question of opening the fuse box, putting a canister into the slot, and reprogramming
far too difficult. In '98, when I had a Sunfire, I went in with the General Motors scan tool, and I could toggle my daytime running light settings on and off with a scan tool.
So I agree, manufacturers could Just
There,
start
on a
advocating
lot
for
of
the-
models, there is a path to the lighting system through the software.
So maybe we can Google our make and model and year and see if we can maybe do that. Again, I'm talking for people that aren't usually this savvy about cars, and I get tired of people saying, you know, you're dumb. You're not dumb.
No,
We
not
can't
at
know
all.
everything, but if you do know, help out the people around you.
You
and
think of a
check
basic
for them.
car from 10 or 20 years ago, you'd start the car and none of the dash lights would come on because it was all
how you
analog
would know.
instruments.
Yeah.
And that's how you'd know. You couldn't see how
Yeah.
fast you were going when the sun went down. Oh, better turn on the headlights. Now, again, they're lit up. So you can see that all of these dash lights are on. You forget that you don't have any taillights because there's no real good signal.
I still would advocate first and foremost, put on your full lighting harness every time you drive. Get in the habit of doing that, and then you'll turn it off when you're out. It's the safest thing to do, day or night.
This is a good news story. Unfortunately, you'll still be cursing at people on the road for a little bit, at least to 2025, right?
Well, 2025, yeah, we catch up. But anyway, I think this is finally a step in the right direction, and I'm really glad that Transport Canada is getting behind it. We'll be back with more Lemonade Car Show. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show. We're joined now by OMVIC CEO and Register, John Carmichael, and George Innie, the President of the APA.
Thank you.
John, the OMVIC is a consumer protection association, but it's actually formed from the other side of the aisle, the salespeople, which is in its incarnation. And you were there. Tell us a little bit about why it came about and what role you played.
Well, thank you, Lorraine. It's good to be with you. And OMVIC was actually begun in 1996 by car dealers on the new and used car side of the aisle, and by the Ontario government, who cooperatively wanted to create a better environment for consumers, a better educated dealer body, a dealer body who understood what the consumers' needs were, and to consumers to provide a protection, if you like, that OMVIC could provide them, that they were going to, that when they bought a car, new or used, from a dealer in Ontario, they were buying a vehicle that gave them comfort and protection to know that there's something behind it, which OMVIC is. And it was begun in 1997 as an official agency. It took us about 6 months to get fired up, to get staffed up, and it's been a great success since that time.
I've got to tell you, Lorraine, when OMVIC started, what the mantra was that this was letting business take care of business. But for people like us on the consumer side, we thought it was giving the lunatics the keys to the asylum. We just thought, how is this ever going to work? The car dealers will police car dealers. And in fact, I mean, we were skeptics for a good long time. But if you look at the arc of what OMVIC has managed in, I guess, almost 20 years now,
It's 20 years as of April 7th.
versus maybe the consumer ministries in the other provinces that have kind of been a bit stagnant, very much affected by budget cuts. OMVIC ended up being the leader on a lot of initiatives. And some of the work that was done in Ontario was later copied in the other provinces as a model as well. So to some degree, Alberta and British Columbia have a similar system. They don't work, certainly they don't all work to the same standard or have the same level of activity. But OMVIC was a bit of a leader for some of the other provinces, that model. The idea that you would go from a basically enforcement, sort of policing function done by your regulator with standards, to more of a professional body, which would do have a broader mandate than just that.
Absolutely.
Where did you find you had to do the most cleanup? Or I should probably say, where did you start the template for the regulations you would soon enforce?
Well, and I think that's probably closer to what it was all about, because it really wasn't a cleanup. It was a matter of creating an environment that gave our industry a better look. Number one, ensured a higher degree of education that we could provide to our industry, and then to the consumer, provide them with an opportunity that when you bought a car from an OMVIC dealer, you knew that you were protected. And if for some reason that deal didn't work out, There's a compensation fund today. There's all kinds of protection that ensures that the buyer, the consumer, has comfort to know that they are somebody's got their back. And that's what OMVIC is.
We get asked a lot of times, I know you do too, especially the name of the show, we don't have lemon laws in Canada or in provinces, and some states call them that in the US, but it's a patchwork. Is something like OMVIC, would you like to see this across the country? Should every jurisdiction have, I know it's an obvious question, but is it something that could be done or replicated in every province so consumers had that, something more uniform than?
Well, I think it would be, it's an absolute necessity. When I look at what our people do every day and in addressing consumer complaints or consumer worries or needs, I can't believe that in every province in this country there isn't similar issue arising day by day by day. George mentioned Alberta and BC. They're a little bit behind in time, but they're growing and they're learning to do, and we work with them. I mean, our OMVIC model is the template for regulation in the country, and it would be, I think it would be a tremendous advantage for consumers to have this type of template in every province.
We should point out also, Lorraine, that a lemon law is between the manufacturer and the consumer.
Point.
So this is more between the dealer and the consumer. So in the US, the lemon laws involve the car makers. We would love to see them brought in. They're actually outside of the oversight of an OMVIC or the provincial. In fact, I would argue there are situations where the car manufacturers should be brought in, but you weren't given the mandate for it.
I'll leave that one with you.
Just on advertising, as we pointed out here on the show before, you can have two different prices for the same car in a province because the dealer is held to a higher standard. He has to do a full all-in ad, whereas the manufacturer can have something a bit less that is not.
This is where we need OMVIC and OMVIC-like structures, because for consumers, we go to a car dealer and buy a car from the dealer, and it's not until you hit warranty problems that they're saying you have to talk to the manufacturer. You're going, I bought it here. So it's that confusion
The dealer is often
common.
the middleman, or the middle person.
And we don't think of them that way. We
No.
think of them as the end.
And just for clarity, so our job, our role is on the sales side.
Yes.
So it's strictly the purchase experience, and clearly we want to take the confusion out of it. We want to take the fear out of it, put confidence into it, and ensure that the consumers know that they're when they look at a transaction across the desk from a salesperson or online, they're looking at real numbers and there's no confusion.
Thanks so much, John. We'll go to break. We'll be right back with more Lemonade Car Show. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by OMVIC. This is the portion of the program where we answer questions from you, the viewers. I'm with Chris Muir, Professor Muir from Centennial College, and John Raymond. He's an APA consultant. We had a lot of questions, actually. We always have a lot of questions. They come in email, the 800 number, they come in over Twitter. This is interesting, and I want you both to address it because it's a combination mechanical problem and a consumer problem.
And this is a question that we receive often at our APA offices.
Okay.
It's not necessarily on this model of car.
Okay.
And I think time should be devoted to this.
My Kia Sorento with a 3.5-liter engine died in the fast lane on the 401 2 weeks ago. It had a catastrophic engine failure, just like the engines being recalled due to the class action lawsuit in the US, but it is not covered under that recall. I had an oil change a few weeks prior. Everything was fine till it wasn't. They're asking $7,200 for a used engine for my 6-year-old vehicle. They've shown zero goodwill or responsibility. I want to fight this. I do not believe the defect with their engines is limited to one factory or one engine type. How can you offer advice or information? Now, this viewer, they contacted the APA.
Contacted me, actually.
Let's talk about A, the difference between Canada and the US.
Yeah.
B, recalls and how they apply, and why one car is not the same as another car.
So every case is different. You have to know the nuances on each issue. But we're going to go over that, but it's also important to note that this is an important event for that person. Okay, so that person had a major event, financial and otherwise, and did contact us, was scared, didn't know what to do, but it's not as simple as that, and that's what we're going to discuss today.
So not every recall in the States is applied in Canada. That's number one. Even though we drive the same product, essentially, it's not always the case because
Correct.
it's two different governing bodies. So that's something, if you read it in American papers especially, it doesn't always shake out to here, and vice versa. There's
Or it
things
could be
that-
a regional one. A number of years ago, Volkswagen had a recall on window winders, but it was in the southern U.S.
Yeah.
It didn't, regulators,
And
it didn't.
that's quite common. Nissan had one on door latches a number of years ago that only affected the salt states in Canada. So you can get very regional with the recall as well. Yeah.
Now we're talking about a 3.5 liter engine. This wasn't the one that was under the recall in the States even. This
No.
is like if your daughter is sick and you want them to give your son the drugs.
Yeah.
So every auto manufacturer, including in this case Kia, has had a number of recalls. Okay, Kia had them on the 2.4 liter engine that they share with their sister company Hyundai.
Yeah.
You may even have an engine family. We're going to call it a V6 family from a Ford or a General Motors or wherever, but it's only either a certain VIN range, a certain year. Maybe it could only be one or 100,000 motors. So each case is very different. To say that this is the same as the other one is incorrect.
I mean, it's not even the same architecture or engine family. That 2.4 liter is a direct injection inline four-cylinder, where this is a V6, a much larger 3.5 liter engine. They're likely made in different facilities. Different people make them. They're made to differing standards. So to base the idea that your V6 is going to be recalled on an engine that has nothing to do with that V6 is, it's misinformed.
Okay, so not downplaying the issue, which she does have an issue, and we agree. Like this is not
Absolutely.
Yeah.
something that should
No.
happen. However, sometimes this is where the internet is not your friend, and you can be overwhelmed with too much information or it's the wrong information.
And this
so
is why you call the APA.
you call the APA and they help.
Right.
Okay. Chris, how often do you see somebody who's determined that the problem with their car is something they've pre-diagnosed or they've read about somewhere?
Yeah, a lot of the time you'll find that the consumer is going to suffer financial hardship because of the failure on the vehicle, and they're looking for just about anybody else who might be able to bear that responsibility. So they will start trying to shun the responsibility after 6 years of car ownership, and we have no idea the mileage of this engine and what kind of a service
It's
life that it
150
lived.
I think 150,000
Right.
kilometers.
So there's all kinds of questions in there. What actually failed on the engine? Is it a manufacturer defect? Is it a wear component? Is it a time component? Unfortunately, if you don't have some type of an extended service plan, you're well and far outside of that factory warranty. So it does become your responsibility.
So what happened in this case? Okay, what happened in this case, the consumer went back to the retailer, the dealership, said, my car is broken. They looked for help from the manufacturer. In this case, the manufacturer said, you're way out of warranty, it's not a recall issue. And then the consumer called us. So what did I tell the consumer in this case? Number one is you have to get all your service records together and know what you're dealing with because you have to build up a case. Okay, so the case would be, yes, I brought it to my retailer, I did all the work.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to come back after the break, and we're going to find out what happened with this particular comment. We'll be right back with more lemonade. Lemonade. Before we went to break, we were finding out what happened to the mysterious Kia engine failure. Can you finish off for us what happened?
It's still ongoing, but we told the consumer have to build a case and understand your file. So make sure you have all your service records, all the service was performed to the manufacturer's suggestions that are found in your owner's manual, and then present your case to the retailer or dealership service manager or general manager and saying, I'm a loyal customer, here's what happened. I need you to go to bat with me, in this case with Kia, could be anyone, and see where that goes. It will either go, well, they'll say no. They may say we'll pay for partial repair. In other cases, the consumer has to make a choice. Okay, especially this car is 7 years old. If the car was 3 years old, there's another avenue called CAMVAP.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's not. So at that point, that's the first avenue. The second avenue, if they get a no, the consumer can go to small claims court and take either the retailer or the retailer and the brand to court. So this is an ongoing file now. Okay. The areas where we caution the consumer is you have to be certain that you did maintain your car to their standard, because if that consumer didn't, that's an easy out for the brand to say we don't have any responsibility, and that means getting your oil changes done regularly, using an approved filter, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, we're going to flip now to a totally different question that I got actually last week. Somebody's teen daughter going off, she's 18 or 19, first job, school. What kind of car do you get for your kids? So what I want to ask you both, we're parents, our kids are about the same age. Your kids are little ankle biters still. I mean, they're too
Power
small.
wheels.
Power
Maybe
wheels.
something Jeep-shaped, they'll be fine.
But they will get there before you know it. But as a mechanic, I want your take on this, because you don't necessarily want to buy them a new one.
No.
Not always. I mean, I do that. So I always say get them a used minivan. Not too much power under their right foot.
I think it's a question of budget and the intended need. Okay, if the intended need is in the city, you could use something smaller.
Yep.
If it's somebody that's living out of an urban environment, maybe something bigger because they're traveling highways and things of that nature.
What are your favorite used cars?
As far as just something to give to the kids to putter around town, honestly, something small, nimble, a Honda Fit, Toyota Yaris. Yaris are incredibly cheap, and they went for an incredible range of time.
You like Matrix?
The Matrix are great if you need a little bit vibes.
Same
Same car underneath.
Yeah.
As far as small pickup trucks, the Ranger can't be beat if you need something for agro use, right? Kid's got a first job doing construction, needs to load some stuff in the back. Those are cheap, fairly fuel efficient. Not great, but good enough. My big thing with someone young, get them something that is low maintenance and simple.
Yeah,
don't bell and whistle. Simple, because somebody's going to drive it into a curb, a wall, a tree, another car. It's going to get hurt.
And get as many safety systems as you can. So if you're looking at 2012, if it has safety systems that an older 2010 doesn't have, but a little bit more mileage, that's probably the better car.
Absolutely.
And we left off Elantra as the
How
example.
do we leave off Elantras? Yeah.
The other thing for a
You
young
left off
driver,
Elantra.
the other thing for a young driver, check what their insurance is going to be. Some very unassuming cars are very expensive to insure for a young driver.
So Chris brought up a very good point. Sometimes we do things backwards. This is a good way of doing things backwards. You should contact your insurer and say, here's the situation. What would be the best avenue in terms of protecting my pocketbook? And they'll give you a list, whether it's Toyota Corolla, which is another car we didn't mention.
And the other thing is kids, when they start driving, let them drive all the time. We always had a rule, whoever had the G1 did the driving, even if it was just to school, the store, whatever. It's a pain.
Practice.
But the only way they get experience is to actually get behind the wheel. So resist not letting them drive because it makes you crazy. Let them do the driving, so when they are ready to go off on their own, they've had as much time as possible behind the wheel.
Two other points. One, consult the APA or website.
Yeah.
Okay, Lemonade Car Guide is a good example. And the other one is that get the mechanic to check the car before you buy it, an independent
I
mechanic.
was getting to that point. I always end up on that point. Oh, get up on the hoist. Take a look. So-
Absolutely.
Well, no, a lot of times the kid will want a race car.
That's
or
a bad idea.
a lot of male and female children, it doesn't matter, they have an idea of what they're going to look good in rather than what will be good for them.
Usually it's 3 times the budget.
Yeah, and it's usually only got 2 doors and
Yes. Yeah.
but sometimes you got to that's why
As someone who was young and really liked the 2-door thing, I wish I had a station wagon for more of my friends and our adventures together. We always found ourselves taking the sedan or the station wagon.
Yeah, I drove an orange station wagon, a 76 Matador was my university car. That was so not cool.
It's a
Kinda
whole
jealous.
topic unto itself.
Oh, yes, the trauma I experienced because of my father's AMCs. Yeah.
I drive it.
I had a friend's father that got him his first car and removed all the seats except for his, and said, "You're only going to drive alone."
It's a drag car. You're gonna do
Yes,
that,
well, it is.
Oh, well. That wraps up another edition of Lemonade Car Show. I'd like to thank John Raymond and Chris Muir, our sponsors OMVIC and Crown Rust Protection. Thanks to you viewers.